You have a purpose. You have a purpose. And you have a purpose. Everyone has a purpose. And if you don't know what it is yet, why do you even exist?
It's easy to lose yourself in a purpose. Make sure it's a good one.
Excuse me. What's my motivation?
Even the tiniest rock creates ripples.
Well, the good Lord told me to be a chicken sexer, so I'm going to be the god darnest best chicken sexer there was ever been. I screwed that one up so bad.
Bum, 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 bum. Welcome to the Epoch Podcast, your twice monthly dose of mental foreplay. My name's Matt.
I'm Jen.
I'm Austin.
I'm Christina.
And I'm David.
And this week we have a special treat. We are going through a episode number 57 of the New Age Christianity podcast from the originator of that podcast, Austin Fletcher.
Hello. I think it's probably worth mentioning that in this new 2020 format, with the, what'd you call it, bi-monthly?
Twice monthly.
Twice monthly?
I did not assume it's gender or sexuality.
Okay, right. Well, twice monthly, which means basically 2 times a month, which was a whole other discussion. What does bi-weekly really mean?
Mm-hmm.
It could be either or.
It literally can be either. What the heck?
What?
Google it. It's weird.
It's the dictionary.
We're doing 2 episodes a month, people, and the first episode of every month we go through basically content that is driven by our listeners, our the people who follow our podcast or go to the website, and so check out our Patreon. If there is a topic you would like us to talk about, and you send us a message, say, "Hey, I'd really like you guys to cover this," I think you'd be surprised. We'd probably get to it pretty quickly at this point. Otherwise, we are going through videos and posts that have high levels of traffic and communication on our site. And then the other episode, we are going over content that each of the people on this podcast have our own, our own businesses or our own communication platforms outside of the Epoch. And mine is newagechristianity.org. And I just did episode number 60. And I just I'm about to start a series on Unpacking the Secret, which is the video on the law of attraction. And that's going to be 13 episodes. So I am loving that project. And I really enjoy having this outlet to talk about other things that, may not necessarily be just New Age Christian concepts. I love how on this podcast we talk about parenting, we talk about finances, we talk about there are certainly spiritual things, but hopefully you guys will enjoy the new format. And this week we are talking about my 57th episode, which was 4 weeks ago? The purpose-driven lie. And it kind of came out of, for me, there was one of those moments, how you have those moments in your day where people say these things that they just kind of irk you. And for me, I had one of those moments at Thanksgiving where the comment came out, or it was a pre-Thanksgiving thing, about how, we all have this purpose, and until you find your purpose, you're just wasting time. It was essentially the takeaway. And for me, I spent a lot of time in my Christian journey kind of pursuing that idea that everyone has this cosmic, high-level, super powerful purpose, and if you're not living it, and if you're not pursuing it, then you're a waste of space. And not to over-dramatize it, if you will, but that is essentially the message that I was taught, and that is the message that I bought into, that everyone has to have this cosmic thing, or else you're really not playing your part, you're not that cool, you're not very helpful for the kingdom, and you're just being lazy or whatever. And over the years, what for me was a message with the purpose-driven life, and I should insert here that The Purpose Driven Life, the book that was written by Rick Warren, is a wonderful book. I have nothing against the book, honestly. It is what that book did in a lot of people's culture, the culture of the church, kind of started this like, find your purpose, find your purpose, find your purpose. And for 20 years since then, roughly, I think it was like 19 years, I can't remember exactly. Since then, what I have seen is people who don't have this deep, abiding sense of purpose, who are told constantly that they should have that. What it produces is a whole bunch of condemnation, and I'm not good enough, and I'm not serving the kingdom, and I suck, and I'm not as cool as they are. And I watched it produce some serious depression in people who just never really felt like they had this cosmic thing that they were called to do. They never really felt like, oh yeah, I'm on this earth to be the president or to be some big thing. And when you back up and you think about it, and there's 7.7 billion people on this planet, not everybody is going to be a mover and a shaker. Not everybody is going to be the president. Not everybody is going to be this big, meaningful thing in the direction of the world. And so I think you have to kind of revisit the definition of what purpose means and what the energy of this thing is. And so my gripe is not against the book, and it's not against the idea of purpose. My gripe is against the culture that has been created inside of the Christian world largely. And it's kind of become pervasive in the secular world, of this idea that you were here for a reason, and until you find it, you're just wasting time. And there's bigger ideas out there that I've started to see. And so my episode, again, The Purpose-Driven Lie, was to kind of push back against that. And you guys all listened to it. And I could give a further outline of kind of the points that I made in that episode. But, I'd encourage our listeners to go check it out. But I am curious what you guys thought of it.
Well, first off, I'm glad that I don't have to rebuke you for blaspheming the name of Rick Warren.
What?
But, I actually thought you were going to go a different direction with that podcast. I really enjoyed the podcast as it was. It was fantastic, and family friendly. Had the kids in the car while we were listening to it. I really expected you to dive into purpose out of identity, as opposed to identity out of purpose. So that's kind of what I came prepared to talk about a little bit today. I know I commend you for taking on the topic. One of the big reasons for that is because I was doing a series of podcasts for Evolving Parent, the podcast that I work on from time to time, and I got to a sticking point where I got through identity, and I was ready to dive into purpose, and I was like, oh man, that's such a huge thing, and I feel like it was daunting to really sit there and tell people what the purpose of life was. I mean, obviously, there's ways to do it where you don't set yourself up as some kind of authority as to what they should do with their life. But it was listening to you talk about it was very helpful for me. So.
Definitely. I enjoyed it as well. I think I am one of those people who's like, I have a purpose and I'm going to change the world. And so having that kind of, at some points in my life, hang over my head, like, oh, I'm not living up to my purpose, or, what I should be doing, or, my purpose or my drive has changed in the last X amount of years, and that's okay. And I think I walked away with the grace of, sometimes you're going to want to go lead a march down City Hall, and sometimes you're just going to sit on the couch and be present with the people that you love, and that's okay. So I enjoyed that.
I personally, David found the book actually in his dad's library, so we kind of at least I glanced through it. I skimmed over most of it actually, and because I was trying to figure out like, where did this notion come from? Because I feel like his book honestly wasn't really trying to say that everybody should have a grand purpose. So I was like, but at the same time, I do see that some people have come away with that. I don't know if they necessarily all got it from that book, but clearly they didn't all get it from that book. But I feel like his main premise was just that everyone has relevance and significance and can make a difference. I do think that he it was certainly written through an old school lens. Like reading through it, there were parts that were grating on me from the perspective that I have now. But I did expect it to be more I don't know. I didn't find what I was expecting in it, I guess, in light of what your podcast was saying. So I know that you were going off of more the concept than just specifically the book. And knowing
Correct.
you, I know you probably hadn't actually read the book recently either. But it was interesting to me to find, because I did want to go through it and I did want to try to find really what he was trying to say. And it seemed to me that his point was that as people, we should have basically the same mission as what Jesus did, just continuing his mission essentially. And that there are various ways that you can do that. So I feel like, it's pretty common that I guess the church or people in general will take something and run with it in a different direction than what maybe was intended. But overall, I just came away thinking, I I don't know. It was a little while ago that I listened to your podcast, but I felt at points. Overall, I feel like your heart was very good, and your humility came across really well in, saying how it was easy to judge people back in the day, how you felt it was easy to judge people that didn't have some sort of purpose, and apologizing for that and all that kind of thing. And I had the same kind of, at least subconscious notion of like, how can you be wasting your life,
Right.
But at the same time, I don't feel like I ever really completely bought into the idea that everyone had to have this huge life-changing or world-changing, purpose specifically. But I definitely always felt like, if nothing else, there are some things that are more worth doing than others with your life. Like that's definitely the premise, the lens that I've looked at things through. And so there has always been a little bit of a guilt mindset for myself to some extent. Like I never felt like I could just sit around doing nothing for a long time. Like David has helped me get a lot more chill, which honestly he would probably still say I'm not that chill, but we at least have a good communication about how we do things for the most part now. But I used to be a lot more uptight about like, we can't waste time. We got to be doing stuff. And that obviously plays somewhat into personality and ways of working and all that stuff too. So, but in line with purpose, like I did always at least have the notion, some things are more worthwhile than others to do with your time, basically.
Because it is kind of funny. Was it, I don't know if it was you or in the book, I can't remember, but saying there's always that one person, and there were a couple of those people in my high school class, and I remember just like the amount of guilt that I felt, because when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And either for the kingdom or for, well, I mean,
that's not even like,
that wasn't even a thing back then. But like as far as Christianity or my Christian life or whatever, and I'm like, what the heck, and so I literally spent like a while just beating myself up that I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna be a lump on a log, because I just didn't. I'm like, nothing really jumps out at me. I don't feel like this is the thing that I'm going to be devoted to for the rest of my life. God, are you really there? Why aren't you talking to me? Why aren't you telling me what I need to be doing? And so more than anything, it really resonated with me, and it kind of what you said in your podcast and it made me see, this is another of these self-inflicted wounds that the church has.
Right.
Yet another one. Thanks for pointing another one out, Austin. Another way we shot ourselves in the foot again.
I've been in ministry for a long time, and my ministry has changed, but I still see it. I see a lot of people that have, I don't know, they come to me for, hey, how can I rethink this? How can I see this thing? And I'm telling you, I get, and I appreciate you, Christina, talking about I wanted to make sure people realized I was not going after Rick Warren's book.
Mhm.
I remember being in those. I took 2 purpose-driven life small group studies. So I've read that book at least 5 times. I did the workbook twice. And I know the energy of what I walked away with was, I'm going to change the world. And until I am, I need to keep searching. And now but that's also filtered through my personality, and it's filtered through this kind of sense of purpose and drive and destiny that I've always carried. So it certainly fueled that fire in me. And I did consider that, like, okay, was this Rick Warren's book, or was this just me? But on the flip side, I have seen many people in ministry throughout the years who have that sense of guilt and condemnation when you sit down and you talk to them about, happiness or what they want to pursue in their life. If you were born and bred in church, it is this sense of like, I just, I don't know. I don't really feel like I'm supposed to do anything amazing. I just want to go have a 9-to-5 job and have 2 kids, and I want to have a happy marriage and go on vacation twice a year. I don't know. And there's this sense of like, well, that's not good enough. Your happiness is not good enough. You need to change the world. You need to be effective. You need to do something that scares you. You need to have a dream or a visitation or something really big. And again, not everybody walked away from Rick Warren's book with that. That's just so much of the experience that I saw. And maybe I just attracted it because that's what I thought. And so maybe I'm willing to admit, again, on the episode, I apologize, and I'll apologize here. Like, I thought less of people. I did honestly think less of you if you didn't have this big internal drive. And I thought, man, what a waste. And it was my mission as a communicator to try to help people find it, because I firmly believed that we were all created for a purpose. And I still believe that, but in a much, much different energy now. Like, the definition of purpose. I loved your hook, Christina. I think you said even the smallest pebble still makes ripples.
Yeah.
Like, purpose is not, it's not what I used to think, but for so many years, not only did I participate in making people feel like shit, I think I got to see and minister to a lot of people who felt guilty. They felt like a waste of space. They felt crappy because the culture that came out of that purpose-driven concept. And again, maybe I'm just overemphasizing Rick Warren's book. He wasn't the only one who came out with that concept. It's not the only source of that idea. I think there is this human desire to be meaningful, that until we are meaningful in some measurement, which with movie stars and politicians and powerful businesses is kind of like, well, unless I'm one of those people, I'm not meaningful. I think there's lots of things kind of pressing into this condemnation, and I'm here to proudly tell you it's bullshit. Like, it is one of those things I have come to love the truth. I've become jealous of some of my friends who do have 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, and the dog. Like, there is a measure of simplicity and happiness that I see in them that I've never had. And I was having a conversation with a friend last night, realizing, oh my gosh, like, I have had this massive definition of change the world. Austin, you're here to change the world. And the backhanded slap that comes on the backhand of that is, until you're changing the world, you're not good enough. Right? Until you're changing the world, you suck. And I have manifested a whole lot of failure and a sense of suckiness because of this whole purpose-driven lie. And again, I'm not picking on Rick Warren. He communicates some really beautiful things, but there is an energy to it that I just, it irked me, and it's resonated with me the last month of just like, I'm rebuilding my own life around this truth, around revamping this truth. And it is, I am curious. So, how many of you actually read the book when you were,
in 2002? Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering what year was that?
2002.
I think it was.
It came out in 97.
What?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it came out
But
earlier.
it did get. Did it get popular?
It got more
'Cause
popular, I feel like,
I
at
remember
the-
reading it around 2002, give or take.
Yeah, it didn't hit. I think the study guide came out in like 02 or 01. Like it was, it simmered for a while before it really hit. But according to Google, in my notes, it was published in 1997.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was 17 years ago that I read it, and I think my mom gave
Your
me
mom
a-
gave us to us.
Yeah, and it was a powerful book. I mean, I wasn't a huge reader at the time, and I still remember like, I have to wait 40 days to finish this thing. No way! And I was just like, reading 3 days here, 2 days there, 4 days there. Like, I cruised through it, and I was eating it up. And I think, maybe it's a symptom of the time, like the age I was at, the time in my life where I was at. But this having wanted to have a purpose, and somebody saying, "Yeah, you have a purpose," and like, I do have a purpose. It's do, and then ending up in the church, and then I think if you demonstrate an interest and a little bit of aptitude, and you have youth on your side, like, and you're in the church, like people will be like, "Yeah, you have a purpose. You're going to change the world," and just all these things are encouragements, but also like expectations are laid on you, and you're like, okay, well, it's been 5 years and I am not there yet. Like,
And now I officially suck.
Right? And man, I've kind of dealt with it all the way up until even just recently. Like I was last month, I did a little ayahuasca retreat, and that was one of the questions I brought up. Like, and it was fun because like as soon as I asked the question, like I already knew the answer. I was like, oh, all right, we're good. But just had to remove another layer of condemnation that I had, applied to myself with the help of the church.
Yeah, I don't know. What was the question?
Did you read it?
Oh yeah, I did read it. But honestly, like I don't. I've had peers growing up actually use the word driven to describe me, and so reading it didn't really like alter my course because it's kind of just in me to just go and do things and kind of just keep the eye on the prize. But definitely, I think in this stage of my life, it's been more of like, it's okay. I'm sitting here marinating the next purpose and the next dream, and I guess finding peace in that. You can read a page at a time. That's okay.
I guess I'm curious. So, like, for me, it is, I don't know if it's a recent revelation or like, how certain revelations you have years ago, but they just make more and more and more and more sense over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if it's a new one as more as it's just like, it's just settling in where you're just like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Wow, that's really true. Well, duh. But, that the meaning of life is happiness to experience. I came that you would have life and you would have it more abundantly. That's what Jesus says. Like that experience and joy, and like we have this, I think this goes a bit beyond this whole purpose driven thing, but it goes to this like, well, what is the meaning of life? Obviously the underhanded premise is that we're all headed towards some finish line. And my question is, well, then once you get to that finish line, then what? Dramatic pause.
I mean, I guess I would have to ask you what your definition of the finish line is, because are we talking about like physical death? Are we talking about achieving all our goals? Are we talking about the afterlife? And
That's a
Whatever that
great
looks
question.
like.
I'm not defining it. I just think is there energetically, would you guys agree
Definitely.
that there is that by and large, especially the Christian culture, but most culture, especially Western culture, whatever, that there's this kind of underlying energy of like, well, we're all going to some sort of finish line, right? Whether it's, I think most people would call it heaven. Some people would call it, like those people who aren't necessarily spiritually minded might say, well, when I retire or whatever. I mean, there's all this, the energy being, I'm going somewhere, and until I'm there, I'm not done. Right?
Mm.
Does that resonate, or am I just the only one who's thought that for 38 years?
I mean, definitely probably a new thought process on myself, but I'm at the point where I'm like, there's never going to be a finish line. There's always going to be something else. And what I imagine and create is what's going to be the outcome. And so, in a sense, if, I don't know, like I've never been the one, like, I'm not going to retire. Like that's been kind of like in my household, you need to have the same job and you need to get this retirement so you can sit and have this easy life. I'm like, the moment I retire is the moment I'm going to start dying. Like I'm just going to keep going and experiencing life and doing things and having a purpose in that regard. And then playing around with this idea of death, and does that really have its hold on me? And at this point in time, I'm kind of in the thought process of, if I mentally give it its power, then yes, and if I don't, then no. And so really playing with that. And then the afterlife is just kind of, maybe I will hang out in Streets of Gold, and maybe I'll go create my own. I really don't know, because I'm still working that out, and that could be really out there in left field for all of you all. So there you go.
I have two comments here, and the first one being about your question. The second one being about your question. The first one being about what you were just talking about, Jen. Because could it be something about the time that we were born in? Because I feel I've always thought the same thing that you've thought about retirement, and seeing people around me, close people around me retire, has really like opened my eyes. Because I've been like, holy crap, once it literally has been that, like once they retired, they're like, I'm just gonna watch TV now, and then all of a sudden they're like, this basically, I mean, kind of how it went. Like their health deteriorated like that. Once they're like, okay, I don't have anything to do now, so I'm just going to enjoy myself. And then all of a sudden they, everything starts not working anymore. And could it be, the lack of purpose maybe? I don't know. And I was thinking, well, the point of Rick Warren's book maybe could have been a redemption of purpose, or a way to elevate purpose maybe. And people took it, internalized it so much, because we were just coming out of an age where the purpose was
Survival.
having a steady job and being job. The boomers maybe, like it was all about work. It was all about, I'm going to give my life to this company because we need to put food on the table. And you saw people working these jobs for 20 plus years, retiring, and then, and that's where that was the boomer generation. I mean, that was the people that were doing that. And then we get to the point where I'm like, heck no, I don't want to do that.
I think it's interesting. I never thought about that, but you could say that the generation before this book, 20 years ago, the book came out, that he was largely writing to people that had grown up in a world where it was the responsibly driven life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's saying, look, chase passion, chase purpose, chase you. And to that end, absolutely. That's why I'm not trying to beat up his book. I think it's, but yeah, I think, he was, it's easy for us to forget what the world looked like 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just emphasizing, it's crazy how much stuff has changed in that amount of time.
Because I mean, around that time was when like over the internet communication was just making tiny headway. I mean, we were talking about chat rooms and stuff, and I remember feeling so cool that my friend was able to get me to. My friend figured out some way for me to be able to call, because it was right around the time where I moved to the States from Costa Rica. So I had a lot of friends in Costa Rica and family and everything. And he figured out a way for me to call over the internet, talk to a server that was calling over the phone there in Costa Rica. And I felt like I was something else.
Probably Vonage, right? Remember Vonage?
It was probably,
VoIP,
Might have been
voice over
before
internet protocol.
paleo Vonage maybe. Because it was some server or something before servers were a thing. I don't
Point being, things have changed a bit.
know. A lot.
Just a bit since Rick wrote that book. Yeah, I mean, he was largely writing to a population that had grown up in the responsible age. And now we have more and more capacity to chase passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so David, you kind of hinted towards, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but you hinted towards kind of what I believe my major point was in saying, like, look, if you can back up and just kind of picture this energy where a lot of people have this idea that my purpose is at the end of the rainbow, it's at the end of this race, it's at the end of this river, I need to get there, and then I will have accomplished it. And so you have this retirement idea, you have this, well, when I die idea, and it is, everything is moving towards someday in the future at the end. And that's my purpose. And the point that I'm both embracing myself as well as I tried to make in the podcast in the middle of it was like, the truth is life is the purpose. So what happens if your purpose is to live? What happens if your purpose is to be and exist and experience? And suddenly, whether you're working or retired, when you're retiring and you get to that end and it's like, well, now I have served my purpose, and it's a past tense thing. So it was in your future and then now it's in your past. And so what do I do now? It's because you attached your purpose to this moment in time. But what if you backed up off of that paradigm and you attached your purpose to today? And your purpose is to enjoy and to be. And whether you're working or retired, you still have a purpose. That you don't have to go to work anymore. Now you can go golfing every freaking day if you want. And that's the purpose of life. And that's the meaning of life, because you wake up attached to your purpose right now. And whether it is 2.5 kids, white picket fence, and a dog, or whether it is President of the United States, the joy of it is in the moment. The joy of it is always present with you. It's not in your future and it's not in your past. It is now. And, you could get into Eckhart Tolle and the power of now and stuff like that. There is elements of that, but that was kind of where I was realizing, like, man, shame on me for not only in my own life, like putting my purpose into this thing outside of me, but also missing the joy of now, missing the joy of, like, man, I've had some amazing experiences, met some amazing people. Maybe my purpose is always following me and I'm living it every day. And heaven forbid my purpose be to be a dad of 2.5 kids, white picket fence, and a dog. Like, that, by the way, that's the average American family. That's why I keep saying that. So that is, I don't know if it resonated with you guys. Or you guys kind of had different comments about it, but that I don't want this podcast to go without kind of landing on, like, what is a new way to define purpose, because it's a cancer in a lot of people's minds. That it got me fired up because when I heard that at that gathering, that pre-Thanksgiving gathering, all I saw was flashes of so many people that I've seen in tears because they're failures, because they're not good enough, because they don't have this purpose, and all they want to do is have a good time in life. And I want to do my part to try to kind of free people from those shackles, because it's bullshit. It's miserable bullshit.
First, I want to really draw attention to the idea of how hyper aware this group is of context. Like we just recorded a podcast where we talked about Jonathan Welton and his awareness of context for the audience. We just went back and did that for a Rick Warren book. Not necessarily like 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians. We just did it for Rick Warren's book here 20 years ago, not 2,000 years ago.
So context woke here.
Right? But I also want to share like how much peace I gained from watching a movie like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that movie, but how they go ahead and they build this computer called Deep Thought with the idea of asking it this ultimate question of the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And they have to come back, years later.
It's like generations later, isn't it?
Yeah, and to get the answer, and the answer is 42. Like 42, and it's and I don't know if it was the author's intent or not. If he was just putting out a silly answer as a response, but then when you look at coding language, and it's I guess the ASCII, code 42 means whatever you want it to mean. Like, so the answer, the ultimate meaning of life is whatever you want it to mean. Like, and how much peace that gave me. I was like, all right, we're good.
Yeah.
Like, I feel amazing now. Like, I've had so much pressure to be this massive evangelist and to share with everyone. And it's not that isn't within my heart still, but just like, man, like, life's whatever I want it to be. There's so much freedom there. And, oh yeah, freedom's a big part of the gospel too. That's weird.
Weird.
I have so many thoughts about everything. I don't know if I can.
Holy crap.
What?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
So many thoughts.
It wasn't about you. I was just I
You had a revelation.
I never finished my second thought.
Oh, we'll finish it.
No, go for
Well, you're gonna lose it if you don't.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Going once, going twice. So I feel like I tend to get hung up on words a lot, and so it's helpful for me to have this discussion because just listening to a podcast from you or anything that's like an article or anything, obviously I can't have the back and forth. So
Right.
I think it's what you're explaining right now, I feel like at least for me did not come through exactly on the podcast, or maybe I'm hearing it differently. As far as, because when you first say the words of the purpose of life is to experience it, like my first thought is, well, that's a pretty selfish perspective, because there's absolutely no way that you can. I'm not saying I was thinking you were selfish. I'm saying like to think if your only goal is I just want to experience life, it's so very selfish. Like it's completely self-focused. So when whatever way you were saying it now, I was getting more of the context of like to really enjoy life in a kind of like more of an outward, I don't know, outward energy, like I can't even explain it, but I got a different energy from what you were saying just then. And I guess, because also when David said his thing about someone retiring and then losing all sense of purpose and just doing whatever they felt like doing, to me that's kind of like the opposite of what you were saying. So they're like living for themselves now and doing whatever they want to do, and they're going downhill. And so to me that's like, and I think that's probably where I somehow kind of brought the connection in then, because you were saying that was proving your point, and I was like, that seems like it's disproving your point, because they are living for themselves now only, but if they aren't living it with an intention of like joy and I don't know, like vibrancy and like seeing the meaning in living, then is when they're going downhill, I think. And so you as a person bring the purpose to your life, in a sense, the way that you do live. And I actually, some of the stuff in the podcast that you said brought up made me think of some verses. And so I looked them up. Colossians 3:23-24 says, whatever you do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is Lord Christ whom you serve. Just the concept of it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Just do it well. Like, do it. And to me, that's one of the things that I feel like didn't come through or was missing for me, or is missing for me in the concept of just living life to experience it is, and I feel like this is one of the things that Rick Warren was trying to say in his book, was the idea of being connected with the Creator, who does have a great purpose in general. And that for me, I feel like, and this is kind of how I've just always felt, is like you can kind of plug into that in whatever way that you want to, in a sense. Or if you're having that connection, you'll be able to plug into what God is doing and derive purpose from that, as opposed to there's only one thing I can do, and if I can't figure it out, then I'm screwed. I feel like in whatever context that you're in whatever situation, that's something that I've been thinking about lately, is the fact that you're unique. It means that there's no way for you to not matter on this earth. Like, you can't not matter, because you bring a unique perspective. You bring a very unique combination of things to any situation that you find yourself in, to any relationship, interaction that you're in. You are the only one that brings that specific set of experiences and beliefs and understandings and empathy and all those kinds of things. Like, so in every situation that you're in, there is purpose for you if you want to be bringing purpose to that situation. And for me, I guess I just feel like being in tune with spirit and with what God is doing in any situation gives you the chance to be part of something so much cooler and bigger than if you're just solely thinking about experiencing life. But again, I feel like that's where I get hung up on the semantics of what you say, because I can see that you would probably think about it in a bigger way than what it comes across sometimes in the words. And again, this is also from this same kind of perspective that you have, that, well, why wouldn't you want to be part of that bigger thing? And so there's kind of like, is it okay to not care about that bigger thing at all? Because I don't think that caring about the bigger thing necessarily equates to, oh, I have to be I don't feel like it has to have guilt attached to it. And I don't feel like there has to be like this giant thing that you're a part of, like a giant project or anything like that. It's just like the little moments of the day. If you are in tune with spirit, you can be moving and working in that purpose. So like just interactions with your kids, interactions with people, I don't know. And like you said, like just enjoy, or like I got the feeling, I guess, in this conversation of just the joy. And I think Rick Warren also mentioned it, the concept of like worship, not being like singing songs and all that kind of stuff. And I think the heart of that is probably meant to be somewhat of what you're saying, of the enjoyment of life. It's different words, different language or whatever for some of the stuff that the church tries to say. I think it's like, on the one hand, they're saying, worship God, and worship is everything you do with your life. But on the other hand, also still having a little bit of that guilt, like you have to be doing that.
Have any of you ever heard of Christian hedonism?
I have heard of it.
No.
It's an idea that John Piper kind of came up with. That is basically the idea that the more we love life, the more we do things in life that we love, the more glory God gets, because of us loving what we're doing. And to me, that just kind of like, this whole conversation is applied around that. Or can be applied around that. The concept of doing things that create love in us should be, in essence, the purpose. And the purpose is to search out things that we love. I mean, it's just so simple. The quote that hopefully I understood it because it's C.S. Lewis, and sometimes he talks like a Brit. But let me read this quote that I was like, man, sometimes I love how he says things when I get it. But, if there lurks in most modern minds the notion that to desire our own good and to earnestly hope for the enjoyment of it is a bad thing, I suggest that this notion has crept in from Kant and the Stoics and is no part of the Christian faith. Indeed, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak.
Mm-hmm.
We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
And, I mean, if we think about it, we're like, oh, yeah. So I'll just leave it there and not belabor it.
I want to say it was Man's Search for Meaning. Crap. Who is that? And it could be totally wrong. Yeah. Have you ever heard the quote that that the glory of God is man fully alive?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, I came that you would have life and you would have it abundantly. It is detaching your purpose from the sense of destiny and assignment and finish line, and attaching it to being, attaching it to living, attaching it to the joy of, yes, if you have children and you enjoy the moment, if you have a job that you love, if you have being miserable for the sake of like, well, I need to do this. Like Paul talks about finding contentment in all the things. He understood that the meaning of life was in the moment. The meaning of life was the joy in the moment. And yes, we have assignments. Yes, we have things that we will start and things we will finish. There are finish lines. There are senses of destiny and all of that. But that is not, what I'm trying to say is that is not the purpose of your life. In that sense, your life is, the purpose of life is to live it and enjoy it and be an experience. That is the meaning of life. That is why you exist. And then in that, yeah, if you have this divine sense of destiny, great. But don't look down on people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you have this divine sense of assignment and I was born on this earth for, I'm telling you, as someone who's believed that my entire life, if you let that poison become your identity, pay attention to let me ask you, those of you who are listening, that you have this divine sense of assignment and destiny and everything like that, how do you feel about yourself in the fact that you're not living it yet? Right? What is the backhanded reality of, well, until I'm there, I must be a failure. I must be not good enough. I need to keep trying. I need to try harder, do better. Like, that is not the gospel. And we've done it to ourselves. We've given ourselves this sense of lack on the back end of on the sense of grandeur, and it is nuanced, and it is something that is energetic. It is, Christine. Again, I appreciate you drawing out the words that I said in the podcast versus the energy of what you're getting from this conversation, because everything is energy, and I mean, and to that end, Rick Warren's words versus his energy, right? I think his energy was great, but for a lot of people, his words translated to this culture. And that is that's the pleasure of being a teacher. Even Jesus, one of his 12 disciples ended up betraying him. And, so I mean, even the greatest teacher the world has ever seen had students who didn't get it. So it's not a commentary on either my podcast or Rick Warren's book, or even Jesus's writings. It is the energy of realizing the meaning of life is to be and to experience the joy of being, that we are individual expressions of the divine creator. And he has never experienced life the way that he has through you, and that he is through you. And if you have a sense of destiny, great, pursue it. but don't let it be this source of condemnation, and don't let it be this thing that makes you miss the purpose of today. And
Exactly.
go ahead.
Yes.
You saying that it's something that you also mentioned in the podcast, and I can't not mention it because I definitely have questions. And I'm curious if you got any kickback on it, and I know you just say stuff sometimes, and then you're like, but you said something about like God's never experienced what it was like to be that one baby aborted, or the person in the
All right.
Holocaust or whatever, and you also said something I think about along the lines of like maybe those people got what they needed to get from that experience or whatever, and I'm like,
That was in the context of reincarnation.
it was in the context of reincarnation potentially, but I am curious, what like, is it outside of that at all, or like what, like, do you feel like God needs to experience that? I don't think so.
I mean,
Well, need is relative there.
right. Far be it for me to define what God needs to experience. I don't know. I would say it was in the context of like one potential idea of the meaning of life is that we are all consciousnesses becoming more conscious of our divine center, our gooey center. And in that we have lessons to learn to become. And that is one of the main ideas behind reincarnation. Reincarnation is one of those ideas. I would never die on that sword. I'm not going to no, reincarnation is the truth, but it makes sense to me that we are divine beings that have eternal life. We are becoming something. We are always being something, and it is this expansive concept of like, I'm learning, and then I'm learning again, and I'm still learning, and I'm still learning, and I'm still learning, and that is the point of, again, it's not this destination of someday I have learned everything, but that it is I am always being. And so contextually, anytime you present the idea of like, well, this is what I think the meaning of life is, immediately people on the back end are going to go, well, what about the Holocaust? What about the aborted babies? What about the rapists? What about the murders? Like they automatically go to, well, if the meaning of life is all this great, what about that? And my proposed answer is that, again, if reincarnation is a thing, that we have lessons to learn, and that the experiences that we gain, if you've had a past life or if you have a life that is yet to come, that not all lives are rosy and perfect and awesome, that a lot of the lessons we've learned, we've all lived long enough to know that a lot of the lessons we've learned come through pain. A lot of the ideas of forgiveness, or the ideas of turning the other cheek, or patience. I mean, never pray for patience. That old saying, like, don't pray for patience or else you're going to be given opportunities to practice it. Don't, if you want to learn forgiveness, that means somebody's going to have to wrong you. You want to learn patience, you want to learn these different things. So it was more in the podcast itself. It was kind of if I remember right, it was like, here's one theory that makes sense to me in some levels. But I don't know. Did I spend much time on it? I can't remember. I didn't listen to it in preparation for this.
Not a ton, but
Okay.
it was enough that I was like, well, not sure.
No. Yeah, inside of it would be the context of, if the meaning of life is to experience it, how do you then answer the experience of, well, I lived for no days and I was aborted. Like, well, how is that meaningful? And so for me, that answer then comes to, that's where reincarnation starts to make more sense. That consciousness reincarnates, and that your consciousness has not been here just once, and it won't be here just once, and that we're all experiencing divinity in ourselves in the experience of being. And that there, you've heard the idea of like old souls versus, that person's obviously an old soul. Like, I think there's a thing to that. And then just YouTube or Google the idea of people who have memories of past lives, very clear memories, children who can express, specific dates and events and stuff that's really obscure. And then you research it, and wow, it's spot on. Like 5-year-olds remembering being a World War II pilot, like that's a thing. So anytime experience reveals itself as being consistently possible, it finds its way into my world as a potential of like, okay, I need to have an answer for this.
I feel like oh yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of religious people like, well, that's just a bunch of bullcrap. Really? You're going to tell a 5-year-old that he's full of bullcrap because it just doesn't fit into your theology? Like, okay.
Yeah, there are a decent amount of things or a number of things like that are definitely intriguing. I feel like one explanation for that could be, though, also just different people being more tuned into the network, so to speak, the spiritual network,
kind of a prophetic connection.
Yeah, just like, I don't know, some people are so I tend to be a little jealous of people that are more in tune with those kinds of things, but I guess and maybe it's semantics, I don't know, but I feel like in my belief or in my mind, the purpose of life is expansion of love and creation, like just continuing to expand. I feel like God, well, I mean, the Bible defines God as love, and love in and of itself, its nature is creation and expansion. Like there's no way around that. So
Right.
To me, I feel like that is how I look at the purpose of life. And when you're talking about having like this end goal concept, to me, at least, the driving force for myself is to continue to see love expand and to continue to see the world be more in tune with that. And at one point I would have probably thought, oh, well, at some point, yeah, there's going to be an end to that. But no, the nature, like I said, the nature of God, the nature of love is continuing to expand past that. So in my mind, there's always work, quote unquote, work to be done in the forward momentum of things. And so I like what you say as far as the enjoyment of life, and that being, to me, I can see that fitting into the way that I look at things as well, in the context of doing a really good job of enjoying life. If you are tuned into the actual meaningness, the meaningfulness of relationships, of love, of all of that stuff, enjoyment, then it is expanding that nature.
Amen.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting into kind of like final thought kind of territory here. So we have been going for a while. Let's just spin it around the circle now.
That means me.
Yeah, no warning. What's up?
All right.
Go for it.
No, and I love the conversations that we're having, and I see different viewpoints and different personalities coming through in these conversations. And I think it all comes down to where we are in place and time on an individual standpoint, in a local community, and in a global sense. And we've talked about the spiral of truth and how it's kind of the circular staircase, and you have this one lesson and you live life and you have experiences and you kind of circle back to it, but you're at a higher level. And that's really, I think, the base of this conversation. Sometimes we're going to be in a place where, my purpose is to enjoy life and to the fullest, and I'm just going to go for it. And sometimes it'll be like, you know what, my purpose is to take this joy that I've lived and experienced it and share it with, my local community. And then there'll be times where it's that greater thought of the global aspect of things. And we see that in all, we see it in a religious standpoint, a spiritual standpoint. Psychologists talk about it. It's not like this concept that is removed from the world and a truth. And so I think as we have these conversations worth having, it's helpful to keep that context and where you are personally where everyone else is around you, and engaging that and having these meaningful conversations, and knowing that, today this is what my purpose is, but in 6 months time, in a year, it might be something different. And it's not that I'm a flake, it's that I'm continually learning and growing and processing what Spirit is having me focus on. So,
For me, I guess the final point I would make, and it was my final point in the podcast, is if you're somebody who does have this kind of divine sense of purpose, great. I am one who does as well. But there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And I think we easily apply that, like, oh yeah, the whole idea of sin, and there's no condemnation and whatever. And we, at least those of us who are New Covenant focused. But it also is the sense of, like, there's no condemnation, period. Like, he came that you would have life and have it abundantly. So if you have this divine sense of purpose, that's beautiful, but don't let it be a source of condemnation. Don't let it be a source. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about, because that is one. And it's a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. It gives you this divine sense of purpose and joy, and yeah, let's go do this. But it also has the potential to cut you, and cut you deep, whenever you fail, or whenever you struggle to live that purpose, whenever you get tired and you just want to spend 5 years just enjoying your family. Like, do that. Find the joy, and find the abundance of life. And you don't need to save the world. It's already been saved. Good news. It's already been saved. Your job is just to be. And if you have a part to play in making it a better place, quote unquote, awesome. But don't let the stress and the strain of it ruin your joy for now. And then vice versa. If you're one of those people that doesn't have all this divine purpose and drive, and maybe you're listening to this episode, hopefully you're saying, I knew it. It's a bunch of bullcrap. And this purpose-driven lie, I'm going to go tell my brother, who's told me I'm not good enough my whole life, that he, to go suck an egg. Yes. Just understand that some people do have that drive, and it's okay. But understand, it takes all kinds to make the world go round, and there is a dynamic between those different types of personalities that I've seen cause some damage. So hopefully you can repair some of the damage in your own heart, and maybe in some of your relationships, by sharing this podcast or the episode number 57 from the NAC podcast, and revisit this question and this idea. So hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think just, again, like Austin said, removing the condemnation is great, because when you're doing something under condemnation anyway, it's kind of, negative energy. But yeah, I think for myself, it has been easy at times to feel a little bit frustrated, because I do have quote unquote obligations with various things, with kids or with other people or whatever, that can feel like it's getting in the way of meaningful stuff. Obviously I feel like my kids are very meaningful, and I love spending time with them. So I feel like just having the context of just living life really well, being present, and basically what would love say? What would love do in this moment? What would be the most joyous thing to participate in? Or those kinds of questions I feel like can help to bring more enjoyment out of life. And I also have found for sure that the lens of gratitude helps a lot with bringing you to a place of more enjoyment in your life, and more expansion of goodness and love.
I did an episode on gratitude too.
Oh,
I think it was episode 56, honestly, the one just before this. It was for Thanksgiving.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I missed it.
To me, the takeaway is to be very aware what is poisoning your well, or yeah, the idea of that, having a long-term goal, having a long-term purpose, like Austin said, is great until you start beating yourself up about that and being frustrated with where you're at. And I feel like that can poison your well, that can poison your energy source, and and bring about things that will actually hinder you from actually getting to your goal. The the biggest thing for me is to be in the present, be where you can enjoy everything that is going on in your life, where you can be grateful about your life, and find the things to love in that present moment, um, and that will keep you moving forward, that will keep you putting one foot in front of the other. And so yeah, the biggest takeaway is be grateful about where you are, and enjoy it and love it. And it's all right to love what you're doing. It's all right. It's cool. I think God likes that you're doing what you're doing and enjoying it.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's an episode of Rick and Morty where Morty says, nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. We're all going to die. Come watch TV. And I think that that sits so at odds with what we've been talking about the entire time here. But I really like the way that Alan Watts frames life as a dance and not as a journey. As much as I love journeys and I love cycles, the idea of the dance, that's not about, getting to the end of the dance. It's about being there in that moment, experiencing that dance, and being there. And I think, it's easy for us to sometimes act like school children who, when asked, what's the point of, going to second grade? Well, to get to third grade. What's the point of going to third grade? Well, get to fourth grade. And never actually just enjoying that experience and really experiencing it as it could be. So I would encourage anybody listening to just be where you want to be with who you want to be how you want to be, but just be. And I think there's a lot of value in that. You can live your life out of purpose and find your identity through that, or you can live your life out of your identity and find purpose from that. But that will prompt you to ask the big question, who am I? And I think that's a really important question to ask. And I think it's a question that people would be well served to ask themselves and to really spend time meditating on that. And, there's some good answers in scripture on that one, but don't be afraid to think too much of yourself, I guess. So, that said, I think this was another properly done conversation worth having. And you can find more of these conversations on theepic.org or on your podcasting platform of choice. Just search them up. I think we put up about 3 dozen last season, and we'll put up a couple dozen this upcoming season. We have social media stuff that we're digging into at Epic Ideas. If I could stutter through that, try again here, at Epic Ideas. And we're trying to beef up that website, make it something that's really a treasure trove of good stuff. If you want to help sponsor that, you can be a patron for us, or you can enjoy some of the MP3s we've prepared for some of the great teachings that we've found and come across. We took the time to put a library of MP3s together that you can download. So maybe if watching a video isn't a great option for you, maybe you download the MP3 and taking it in on the road is one. And we also have some great affiliate links that we provided for products that we think are really cool, adds to your life. Maybe not all of them, but maybe you'll find the one that's for you. And purchasing that through those links really helps us out. So thank you for listening. And we encourage you to really be an active listener and if there's something you want to hear about, let us know. That's like, as Austin pointed out at the beginning of the podcast, we're letting you guys drive this ship a little bit. So take the opportunity to do so.